The last ride home, the streetlights flickered on one by one as dusk settled over Maple Avenue, casting long shadows across the empty sidewalk. Emma gripped the handlebars of her red bicycle tighter, her knuckles white against the chrome. Behind her, small arms wrapped around her waist with a desperation that made her heart ache. "Please," Maya whispered against her sister's back, her voice barely audible over the evening traffic. "Help me." Emma pedaled harder, her legs burning with exhaustion. They'd been riding for nearly an hour, weaving through neighborhoods that grew increasingly unfamiliar. The sky had transformed from golden orange to deep purple, and soon it would be completely dark. She knew they needed to find shelter, but where could they go? "I will take you to my house," Emma had promised Maya 3 hours ago, when she'd found her little sister crying outside their school. But the truth was far more complicated than that simple declaration suggested. Their house wasn't really theirs anymore. Not since Mom had left 6 months ago, disappearing without explanation one Tuesday morning. Not since Dad had started drinking away his grief and rage, transforming their home into a minefield of broken glass and broken promises. The bicycle tire hit a pothole, jolting both girls. Maya whimpered, tightening her grip. "It's okay," Emma said, though nothing was okay. "We're almost there." But where was there? Emma was only 12 years old, hardly old enough to take care of herself, let alone her 8-year-old sister. Yet here she was, Maya's only lifeline in a world that had suddenly become hostile and uncertain. The evening had started like any other Tuesday. Emma had stayed late at school for art club, losing herself in watercolors and brushstrokes, temporarily forgetting about the chaos waiting at home. When she'd finally gathered her things and walked outside, she'd found Maya huddled against the brick wall of the gymnasium, her blue jacket pulled tight despite the mild weather. "Maya, what are you doing here?" "Where's Mrs. Peterson?" Emma had asked, referring to their neighbor who usually picked Maya up from the after-school program. Maya's face had been streaked with tears, her eyes red and swollen. "She didn't come. I waited and waited, but nobody came." Emma's stomach had twisted with familiar dread. Mrs. Peterson was reliable, always on time, always cheerful. If she hadn't shown up, something must have happened. Emma had pulled out her phone and called Mrs. Peterson's number, but it went straight to voicemail. Then she'd tried their father's cell, already knowing what she'd hear, or rather, wouldn't hear. The phone had rung endlessly before clicking to voicemail. "Come on," Emma had said, making a decision in that moment that would change everything. "Get on my bike. We'll figure something out." Now, as they rode through the gathering darkness, Emma realized how naive that promise had been. She'd been operating on instinct and adrenaline, but reality was beginning to set in. They couldn't go home. Not to a father who was likely passed out on the couch surrounded by empty bottles, not to a house where the electricity had been shut off last week because Dad forgot to pay the bill again. Emma thought about their mother, wondered for the 1,000th time why she'd left. Had things been so bad that she'd felt she had no choice? Had she planned to come back for them? Did she think about them at all in whatever new life she'd built for herself? The questions were useless, Emma knew. Mom was gone, and dwelling on the why wouldn't change anything. What mattered now was keeping Maya safe, fed, and warm for another night. "Emma?" Maya's voice was small and frightened. "I'm hungry." "I know, sweetie. Me too." Emma's backpack held exactly $3.47, money she'd been saving from her allowance back when they still got allowances, back when Dad still remembered they existed except as obligations that kept him. Tethered to a life he clearly no longer wanted. She spotted a convenience store ahead, its fluorescent lights harsh against the darkening sky. Emma pulled into the parking lot and helped Maya off the bike. Inside, she carefully selected a package of crackers and a small carton of milk, counting out coins at the register under the suspicious gaze of the clerk. They sat on the curb outside, sharing the meager meal in silence. Maya ate slowly, mechanically, her eyes distant. Emma watched her sister and felt rage build in her chest. Rage at their mother for abandoning them, at their father for falling apart, at the universe for being so casually cruel to children who'd done nothing to deserve this. "Where are we going to sleep?" Maya asked, voicing the question Emma had been avoiding. "I'm working on it," Emma lied. The truth was she had no idea. They couldn't go to a friend's house. Emma didn't have close enough friends to impose such a burden on their families, and explaining the situation would mean admitting how bad things had gotten. She couldn't call the police or child services. She'd heard enough horror stories about kids being separated and sent to different foster homes. Whatever happened, she and Maya had to stay together. "What about Grandma's house?" Maya suggested hopefully. Emma's heart broke a little more. "Grandma lives 400 miles away, Maya. We can't bike that far. Could we call her? Her number's in my phone, but the battery died." Another lie. The truth was that Grandma had stopped answering their calls months ago, overwhelmed by her own grief over her daughter's disappearance and unable to bear the weight of her grandchildren's suffering. As darkness fully descended, Emma made a decision. There was a small park about a mile from where they sat, one with covered picnic areas. It wasn't much, but it would provide some shelter for the night. Tomorrow in the daylight she'd figure out a better plan. They rode through quiet residential streets, past houses with warm lights glowing in windows, past families sitting down to dinner together, past normalcy that felt like something from another lifetime. Maya had stopped asking questions, had stopped doing much of anything except holding on. Emma could feel her sister's trust weighing on her, a responsibility both precious and terrifying. The park was deserted when they arrived, playground equipment casting strange shadows in the moonlight. Emma guided them to a picnic shelter in the far corner, partially hidden by overgrown bushes. She helped Maya off the bike and they sat together on the concrete bench, Maya immediately curling against her sister's side. "Tell me a story," Maya whispered, "like Mom used to." Emma swallowed the lump in her throat. She wrapped her arm around Maya's shoulders and began speaking, making up a tale about two sisters who discovered they had magical powers and could fly away to wherever they wanted. In her story, the sisters found a beautiful house in the clouds where it was always warm and there was always enough food and nobody ever got angry or sad or drunk. They lived there happily, just the two of them, safe from everything that could hurt them. Maya fell asleep before the story ended, her breathing becoming slow and even. Emma sat in the darkness, her sister's weight against her side, and let herself cry silently. She was so tired of being strong, tired of pretending she knew what to do, tired of carrying burdens that should have belonged to adults. She thought about the bicycle that had carried them here, her faithful red bike that Dad had bought her for her 10th birthday, back when he still did things like remember birthdays. She remembered how proud he'd been teaching her to ride it, how patient he'd been when she kept falling, how he'd cheered when she finally managed to pedal without training wheels all the way down their street. That father felt like a different person now, someone who'd been replaced by a hollow shell that looked like him but lacked everything that had made him Dad. Emma must have dozed off because she woke with a start to the sound of footsteps. Her heart raced as she saw a figure approaching through the darkness. She instinctively pulled Maya closer, preparing to run despite having nowhere to go. "Emma? Emma Rodriguez?" The voice was familiar. Emma squinted into the darkness and recognized Mrs. Chen, their former neighbor from 3 houses down before they'd moved to the cheaper apartment across town. Mrs. Chen had always been kind, always stopped to chat when she saw them playing outside.
"Mrs. Chen?"
Emma's voice cracked with relief and exhaustion. The older woman came closer, her face etched with concern. "I thought that was you. I was taking my evening walk and saw the bicycle. What are you doing here, sweetheart? Where are your parents?" The dam broke. Emma tried to hold it together, tried to maintain the facade of capability she'd been wearing like armor, but she couldn't anymore. The words tumbled out, about their mother leaving, about their father's drinking, about Mrs. Peterson not showing up, about having nowhere else to go. Mrs. Chen listened without interrupting, her expression growing more distressed with each revelation. When Emma finally fell silent, crying too hard to continue, Mrs. Chen sat down beside her and gathered both girls in her arms. "Oh, my dear children," she murmured, "you should have come to me. You should have asked for help." "I didn't know how," Emma sobbed. "I didn't want anyone to know. I didn't want them to separate us." "Come," Mrs. Chen said gently but firmly. "You're coming home with me. Both of you. We'll figure out the rest tomorrow, but tonight you need to be safe and warm and fed. But no buts. I won't hear any arguments. You can bring your bicycle. My husband will drive back for it. Maya stirred, waking at the sound of voices. She looked up at Mrs. Chen with confused, sleepy eyes. "It's okay, Emma," told her sister, and for the first time in months, that might actually be true. "We're going somewhere safe." Mrs. Chen's house was exactly as Emma remembered, warm and clean, and smelling faintly of jasmine tea and ginger. Mrs. Chen's husband, a quiet man with kind eyes, helped Emma bring in her bicycle, while Mrs. Chen led Maya to the bathroom to wash up. Within an hour, both girls were sitting at the kitchen table, eating bowls of hot soup and rice, wearing borrowed pajamas that were too big but wonderfully soft and clean. Mrs. Chen made phone calls to Child Protective Services, to Emergency Family Services, to her daughter, who was a social worker in the next county. She spoke in low, urgent tones, occasionally glancing at the girls with a mixture of sympathy and determination. Emma knew that everything was about to change. Tomorrow would bring social workers and questions and decisions about their future. There would be complications and paperwork and probably more tears. But tonight, for the first time in months, she and Maya were safe. They were warm, they were fed, they were together. Maya fell asleep in Emma's arms on Mrs. Chen's couch, and Emma finally let herself relax. She thought about the desperate bicycle ride through the darkening streets, about Maya's whispered plea for help, about her own naive promise to take her sister to her house. She understood now that sometimes home wasn't a place but a feeling, a sense of safety and belonging that could be created by kindness and compassion. Mrs. Chen had given them that gift tonight, had seen two children in desperate need, and had chosen to help without hesitation. The red bicycle stood in Mrs. Chen's garage, its handlebars still slightly crooked from their frantic journey. That bicycle had carried them away from danger and, ultimately, toward help. Emma silently thanked it, thanked the universe, thanked whatever force had led Mrs. Chen to the park at exactly the right moment. As she drifted toward sleep, Emma heard Mrs. Chen speaking softly on the phone. "Yes, 2 girls. They're safe now. No, I won't let them go back there. We'll keep them here until we figure something out." Emma closed her eyes, one arm wrapped protectively around Maya. Tomorrow would bring uncertainty, but also possibility. For tonight they had found harbor in the storm. That would have to be enough. The last thing Emma saw before sleep claimed her was the view through Mrs. Chen's window, the streetlights casting their glow on the quiet suburban street, so different from the harsh fluorescent glare of the park where they'd almost spent the night. Outside, the world continued turning, indifferent to the small tragedy of 2 girls lost in its vastness. But inside this warm house, surrounded by unexpected kindness, Emma and Maya had found something precious. Hope that even in the darkest moments, even when you're desperate and alone and pedaling frantically through the growing darkness, there might be someone who sees you, who stops, who helps. Emma's last conscious thought was a prayer, not to any specific deity, but to the universe itself, that Maya would remember this differently than she would, that somehow, despite everything, her little sister would retain some measure of childhood innocence, that the desperate ride through the night would fade from Maya's memory, leaving only the vague recollection of Emma keeping her safe, of kind Mrs. Chen offering shelter, of warmth and safety and love. As for Emma herself, she knew she would never forget this night, the weight of her sister's arms around her waist, the burning in her legs from pedaling, the terror of responsibility beyond her years, and ultimately, the relief of finding help when she'd nearly given up hope. The bicycle ride was over. The real journey was just beginning.